Good evening, Carl. Can you hear me?
That works.
Can you hear me, Carl?
I can hear you now. And I started by asking, you are Under Secretary for Political Affairs. That's the correct title.
So you asked me?
Yeah. Welcome to Ukraine, welcome to Kiev.
How about I'm just Toria, friend of Ukraine?
Yes. And very nice to see you here. Would have been even greater to see you in real life. But I think we all understand that your diary is fairly filled with all aspects. You used to be, as most people here know, Toria used to be responsible for just European affairs. That was quite a challenge enough during those days. And she's now responsible for all of the world in terms of political affairs at the State Department. We've had a great day here. And among the issues that we've touched upon necessarily has been events in Afghanistan. And there was a fairly vivid debate about that. One of the arguments that Charles Kupchan is sitting here had the argument that this is a wise move by the Biden administration in order to concentrate attention on the big issue that is there, that is China. And that leads logically to the question to you. Does that logic apply to other areas of the world and other issues where you need to cut out in order to concentrate on China? That's a discussion that you find hovering over different areas of the world at the moment.
Well, first of all, Carl, great to see you. I wish I could see all of my Ukrainian and international friends and colleagues in person there at the YES conference. It's very sad to be here in Washington when you are all in Kyiv, but I think you know it's been pretty busy on this very subject, Afghanistan, the last couple of days and weeks. Let me first start by thanking our Ukrainian hosts for all that they did during the evacuation period to get internationals out of Afghanistan who were at risk, and as well as Afghans at risk, and the cooperation that we had. Carl, I'm going to guess that you're asking, does our move out of Afghanistan mean we will do, was that applause I heard? Yes, definitely applause. I think what you're asking is, does our move out of Afghanistan mean that we don't care or have strategic interests in Ukraine anymore? And I think there's no greater exemplar of our continuing commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence, and European aspirations than the summit that we just had between President Biden and President Zelensky, literally the day after our evacuation from Ukraine, from Afghanistan, you got me messed up now, concluded. And as you saw from that meeting, it was an extremely rich agenda, not only in the Oval Office, but in terms of the agenda that we set going forward, including a new forum between the Secretary of State and the Foreign Minister to deepen and thicken the relationship, a new forum between Secretary of Defense Austin and the Defense Minister of Ukraine, and lots of commitments to do more together in the area of cyber, standing up to Russian aggression, supporting reform in Ukraine, etc. So this is not a pivot away from anything that is strategically important to us, but it is a recognition that after 20 years of deep US and international and European involvement in Afghanistan, the primary reason that we went in there, which was to address the threats emanating from our homeland, had been accomplished, and we had given the Afghan people 20 years of democratic governance and military support. I think none of us is happy or satisfied with the way the exit happened in the event, but it doesn't change the fact that we together, collectively, as an international community and as a transatlantic community, made an enormous investment in the Afghan people. And we have lots of things to do together. We have to continue to deal with Russia. We have a China, as you've talked about, that is not only raising its level of ambition in Asia, it's raising its level of ambition in Europe and everywhere else. And we have to work together on those things. We have cyber threats. We also have opportunities to address climate, opportunities to ensure that the internet and all the new technologies serve democracy and serve freedom rather than become tools of repression. So we have a lot to do together, and we are certainly committed to our bilateral relationship with Ukraine, even as we focus on the globe together.
We have, just on a technical note, I'm told that we have a 7-second voice delay, so that impacts somewhat. So I have to step back, you have to step back somewhat. Yes, thanks for that. I think the discussion on Afghanistan will continue. Those waves will be with us all over the world for quite some time. But going to here, you were there for the meeting between President Biden and President Putin. And that covered a rather wide range of subjects. I mean, you naturally have a rather large number of subjects to address with Russia. You should. And the question is, on that long laundry list of issues that you had with President Putin, how high is Ukraine on that list?
I think you know how committed President Biden has been historically to Ukraine, to its sovereignty and independence. So Ukraine figured prominently, both in the one-on-one and in the larger meeting, including, as we've discussed publicly and as the President said at the time, making absolutely clear to President Putin the United States' commitment to Ukraine and our intention to stay involved in supporting her sovereignty, supporting her security, supporting her defense needs.
The present negotiating format is called the Normandy format. That was initiated by the Germans and the French, and you got Ukraine and you got Russia in there. And there have been X numbers of meetings back and forth on different levels. You can discuss how much it has achieved, but clearly not what we sought it to achieve. The United States is not part of that, neither is the European Union, by the way. What do you think the United States can do, not only in sort of bilateral meeting with President Putin, but concretely in order to try to convince Russia, trying to move a political process forward, trying to increase pressure on Russia on primarily Donbass, but of course the Crimea issue should not be forgotten either.
Thanks, Carl. Well, we start by reaffirming, as the President did to President Putin, that our sanctions are not going anywhere until the reason they were put in place is resolved. So that's number one. Number two is continuing to support Ukraine in her self-defense, including with an additional $60 million in military drawdown authority that the President announced in the context of President Zelensky's visit, which allows for the purchase of more javelins, more defensive lethal and defensive support for Donbass. With regard to the negotiating format, you know that in the Obama administration, I and Charlie and others there participated in a parallel process to Normandy. So the Europeans Germany and France would sit in the Normandy format with Ukraine and with Russia. And then we would, in support of the goals and the aspirations, talk to both Moscow and Kyiv to try to support and close the gaps and add our own dose of creativity. all of those efforts don't seem to have moved much recently. I think what we have said to Ukraine, what we have said to Russia, what we have said to the Europeans is we're prepared to re-engage in any manner, whether it's inside the Normandy format, whether it's again in parallel support, if and as the parties see a way that we can be helpful. It sounds like, if my reporting is right, there was a negotiators meeting at the level of Mr. Yermak, Mr. Kozak, and the French and Germans a couple of days ago or yesterday that was at least more positive in tone. And, you know, if this process really revives and gains some life, we stand ready to help.
Absolute key to progress on all of these issues is got, of course.
If I could, Carl, I would
Sorry.
raise one other issue in this.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, there's our 7-second delay. I just wanted to draw attention, I'm sure, in the context of talking about security, you're also talking about the Black Sea. This was very strongly highlighted as well when President Zelensky was in Washington and was in the Oval Office, the importance of ensuring that the Black Sea stays open to international navigation, that freedom of navigation is respected. As you know, we have provided bilateral support there to Ukraine. The Black Sea littoral nations and the U.S. work together, and NATO has also had a number of excursions. But I do think it's a place that we really have to watch in the coming year, and we have to accelerate our efforts to work together to keep the Black Sea open and free.
Sorry, I was just checking the time.
I see you're getting instructions.
I was getting instructions, yes. I was getting instructions so we don't take too much time, because as I said, you have a busy schedule, or rather, I hope you have a busy schedule. We all know that very critical is going to be the state of Ukraine, the stability, the democratic resilience of Ukraine, the economic prosperity of Ukraine, the strength of the Ukrainian nation. And I think one of the really impressive things that I've seen, and you've seen it as well, since the critical days of 2014, has of course been the gradual strengthening of Ukraine. But at the same time, we know it's a long way, a lot to be done, and both sort of we Europeans and you have been trying to help with different reforms, and it's been perhaps a somewhat mixed bag, as is to be expected. From your perspective and your knowledge of the country, where would you see the biggest achievements of these years? And when you've done the big achievements, I'm going to, of course, ask you also about the biggest challenges or perhaps even the biggest failures in these past years. And I hope that you will not be overly diplomatic.
As you know, Carl, I'm rarely overly diplomatic. It's gotten me in trouble, including in Kyiv.
And not only, I might add.
I don't think this leopard is going to change her spots. Yeah. My mother's still unhappy with me, what can I tell you? Look, I think that Ukraine has taken important steps, including in the past year, with regard to land reform, with regard to aspects of anti-corruption, with regard to moving essential reform legislation through the Rada. As you say, the stronger and cleaner and more democratic and more transparent Ukraine can be, the more she will deliver for her citizens, the more she will be able to integrate with Europe, the more she will be ready and on the path to NATO and to the EU. So this is why we talk about reform. And for those of us who were on the ground during the Revolution of Dignity, it's about successive democratically elected governments in Ukraine delivering on the demands that citizens made, which was not about us. It was about a government that delivers for its people. So I think, as we've worked together and we are back into a very rich and full conversation about these issues with the Ukrainian government, we've seen some very good progress. However, there's still work to be done. And, just yesterday or the day before, we were concerned with regard to corporate governance, which has been a success story for Ukraine to establish professional international supervisory boards who pick world-class CEOs, and particularly when you want to move on the course of more privatizations, you want the governance of Ukraine's top 500 companies, top 100 companies to meet international standards. So the structures that were put in place are very good, but when they are not supported or not, when the rules of the road that were put in place and the legislation that was put in place is not followed, it's Ukraine and Ukrainians who suffer. So, we spoke out yesterday about our concern with regard to the ongoing leadership crisis in Naftogaz, including the fact that some of the international supervisors have just resigned. So here we call on the sides to come together on refreshing the board, refreshing the CEO, and doing it in a manner that meets OECD governance principles. And this is also, it's not just about Naftogaz and everybody having confidence in where the money is going and where the profits and the management are going. It's about the overall investment climate in Ukraine. And if you want more American, more European companies to come to Ukraine, as we all do, the more they see international OECD standards, the more confidence they're going to have. And we've got a lot of US companies that want to do more in Ukraine. We just had a new Westinghouse deal signed. We're looking at green energy, high-tech jobs, so we want to do more there. We're also looking forward to the RADA continuing to move forward on the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, the NABU legislation, and protecting its independence, and the final steps on reform of the security services. All of these things are about the health and strength and cleanliness of Ukraine and a government that serves its citizens. So we'll keep speaking about those things, but some progress, significant progress has been made, and we just want to see Ukraine stay the course.
And that's a good list, I think, which indicates both what has been achieved, which is quite an amazing amount if you look at the starting point, but also quite challenging issues as we look ahead. I think, echoing what you said, Toria, one of the key things from your point of view and the European point of view is to attract foreign investment here. We saw the transformative effect that ASA had on the countries of Central Europe, and there's no reason whatsoever that cannot happen in Ukraine. But it needs sort of stability and predictability in corporate governance and the rule of law. And that journey has had its bumps. And there was a bump yesterday, as you rightly indicated. But there was also progress, I think you indicate, on the national security law and those particular structures. So we can note some minuses and we can note some pluses. We shouldn't take more of your time. Thank you. There's only one requirement of you, which is not a demand, is not a wish, is an order that you should be here next year. So next year, Toria, in Ukraine. Thanks.
I would, as we say, next year in Ukraine, I hope all of you will eat some vareniki for me. I miss them. And I miss all of you. Good to see you.
Thanks.